Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for April 11th of 2024. Currently, we have an enhanced risk for eastern Ohio into West Virginia here, as well as a marginal threat that does extend across eastern Georgia, eastern Tennessee, eastern Kentucky, eastern Indiana, Ohio, southern New York, the majority of Pennsylvania, and a vast majority of the eastern seaboard. We also do have another marginal threat further down to the south. However, this is associated with a QLCS that is currently moving through the system and is not going to be covered in today's forecast. Threats for today do include a 10% tornado risk for that enhanced risk area, indicating that we may be able to see the potential for a few tornadoes across that region. It doesn't have the hashed area, so the tornadoes aren't expected to be necessarily strong. Something I do have a bone to pick is why the 5% isn't extended down to here, and I will explain that in today's forecast. Other risks for today do include a 30% damaging wind risk, where we could see the potential for some widespread damaging wind gusts, as well as a 5% hail risk, where we could see the potential for some isolated large hail. Then for day 2 outlook for tomorrow, we do have a marginal threat for Idaho there, eastern Oregon, and northern Nevada. Threats for tomorrow do include a 5% damaging wind risk and a 5% hail risk, where we could see the potential for some isolated damaging wind gusts and some isolated large hail, but we don't really have all that much of a tornado risk. For day 3 outlook, we currently don't have anywhere issued for the potential for severe thunderstorms, but our day 4 to day 8 outlook, we do have a 30% for the Central Plains, for northern Texas, central Oklahoma, and southern Kansas for our day 5 outlook for the 15th, as well as a 15% that was recently added today for the Midwest along the Mississippi River there into eastern Tennessee, eastern Kentucky, and eastern Indiana, where we are watching for the potential for some significant severe thunderstorms. Again, a 30% is equivalent of an enhanced risk. So we are definitely watching for the potential of some significant severe thunderstorms on the 15th. The 30% was issued as far out as day 6, which is extremely rare and extremely hard to get with that much confidence in a forecast. I could probably count on 2 hands the amount of 30% that were issued on a day 6 outlook, and if the confidence is high enough for a 30% on the day 6 outlook, we are probably going to get some significant severe thunderstorms, so we will be watching this 30% closely. Taking a look at our WBC outlook, starting off the excessive rainfall forecast. For today, we do have a slight risk that does extend across the eastern seaboard into the Ohio River Valley for Ohio, eastern Kentucky, western West Virginia, parts of Maryland, as well as Pennsylvania, where we could be watching for the potential of some scattered flash flooding. We do have a marginal threat that does extend across a very large portion of the Ohio River Valley, up across Michigan and Indiana, majority of Kentucky into parts of northeastern Tennessee, as well as along the coast further down to the south for eastern South Carolina, eastern Georgia, and northern Florida there, where we are watching for the potential of some isolated flash flooding. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk for flash flooding for portions of Maine into New Hampshire there, where we could be watching for the potential of some scattered flash flooding. For our day 3 outlook, we do have a marginal threat where we could be watching for the potential of some isolated flash flooding for portions of coastal California between San Francisco and Los Angeles. For our winter weather outlooks for today, we don't have anywhere in the United States that we are currently watching for the potential of some heavy snowfall. Same with tomorrow, but we could see the potential for some heavy snowfall for some elevated portions of California there into portions of Nevada. However, it will stay in the elevated regions. Taking a look at our weather models, starting off with 500 millibars as well as our surface observations and how those are going to work in conjunction with our risk for severe thunderstorms. As of right now, we do have a surface low that is currently tracking up across the eastern half of the United States. This surface low is expected to take a northeastward trajectory and move into portions of the New England corridor. We do have a cold front that is currently draped down across Georgia into Florida that is leading to a QLCS that is leading to the potential of a few tornadoes that did happen across Florida today. And we also do have a warm front that is currently extended across the eastern seaboard for North Carolina into southern Virginia there. This warm front is likely going to continue to push into the north over the next couple of hours, as well as the surface low is going to continue to take its northeastward trajectory, and we are likely going to see some isolated severe thunderstorms that are probably going to fire off in the warm sector as well as along our various frontal systems. However, as of right now, across the majority of this region, we have been seeing mostly a messy convection just free in the warm sector that isn't really attached to any frontal systems, which is likely what we're going to see across this region as well. However, the best chance for storms is likely going to be along those frontal systems, and the more robust storms are going to be along those frontal systems. But as of right now, we do have a upper level trough that is currently advecting out of the south here, out of the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf Coast, and this is supporting the risk for severe thunderstorms as it does advect up into the region of concern as well as across into Florida. And we do have quite a lot of spreading in our wind vectors, so we do have a void in the upper levels of the atmosphere that will support very large and widespread lift across this region. And that's majority of the reason why we're seeing that messy convection across this vast area. And this will support the risk for severe thunderstorms as well as provide us with quite a lot of speed shear. For the risk to the north, where we do have that 5% hail risk, we are mainly seeing 500 millibar flow upwards of 60 miles per hour, which isn't bad, but will supply us with more moderate speed shear across this region, but still will be able to support the potential for some large isolated hail. Taking a look at our 850 millibar winds as well as our low-level jet and how that's going to affect our directional shear and the risk for tornadoes across this region, we are seeing a quite vigorous low-level jet that is going to continue to strengthen over the next couple of hours. As of right now, our low-level jet is mainly around the good 50 to 40 miles per hour across the region of concern, which will definitely provide us with quite a lot of directional shear across this region. We also do have a pretty strong low-level jet that does extend down into the Carolinas, upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour, which will also supply us with some pretty decent directional shear further down to the south. And this low-level jet will likely continue to strengthen over the next couple of hours. However, it will strengthen as storms move out of the region of concern and mostly towards the east into the 5% and the 2% tornado risk. Upwards of 70 to 80 miles per hour at 850 millibars is possible, and that will provide us with a very large amount of directional shear. It does look like our directional shear is definitely going to be pretty strong. However, our low-level jet is going to be greatest whenever storms are outside of this region, so that may be overall more limiting factor as far as the risk for tornadoes. However, we should definitely see quite a lot of directional shear, and we also do have a lot of directional shear further down to the south. So that's part of the reason why I don't understand why the SBC didn't extend the 5% tornado risk further down to the south, and you will see on our composites as well. Taking a look at our 200 millibar and how that's going to affect our speed shear as well as our risk for severe thunderstorms with our defluence. Let's start off with our speed shear first. We are expected to see 200 millibar flow that is expected to reach upwards of 130, 110, 115 knots out of the southeast or southwest, and that will definitely provide us with some pretty decent speed shear across this region, and we could definitely see the potential for some isolated large hail as well. And as far as our defluence, you already saw it on our 500 millibars, but we also do have some noticeable spreading of our wind vectors across this region as well, up to our 200 millibars, which will create a void in the atmosphere and will lead to a very large amount of lift. And that's again why we are seeing convection that is kind of just spread out all over the warm sector, especially across eastern Tennessee and eastern Kentucky. As well as the lack of a cap, which you will see later, and that's allowing for that convection to kind of be all over the place. But that defluence in that void in the atmosphere, that extra lift will definitely help quite a lot with our risk for severe thunderstorms. Taking a look at our storm relative helicity and our directional shear and how that's going to support the risk for tornadoes across this region, we are definitely expected to see quite a lot of directional shear up towards the north. And if we do have decent instability, this amount of directional shear should definitely be able to support the potential for a few tornadoes across this region, with directional shear values that may be able to get upwards of 400 to 500 and 200, 300 meters squared per second squared of storm relative velocity, which is definitely pretty strong and should definitely be able to support the potential for a few tornadoes across this region, regardless of instability, which we will look at later. And then as far as further down south, as I was mentioning, we are expected to continue to see some really decent shear further down to the south, with directional shear values that may be able to get upwards of 300 to 200 meters squared per second squared of storm relative velocity, which will definitely be supportive of the potential of tornadoes further down to the south. Taking a look at our speed shear and how that's going to support the risk for some isolated large hail across this region. Again, we are expected to see some pretty decent speed shear across this region, especially with how strong our 200 millibar jet is. And it's definitely supportive of the potential of some large isolated hail. With bulk shear values at 0 to 6 kilometer, that may be able to get upwards of 30 to 40, mainly around the 40 to 50 knots, which will definitely be supportive of the potential for large isolated hail across this region. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity, we're going to be going over the when and where our storms are expected to be, as well as some general radar analysis. Starting off with our radar analysis portion, again, as I mentioned previously, we currently do have a lot of ongoing advection in the open warm sector as a result of the fact that there's a lot of spreading of those isobars and wind vectors, which is allowing for a lot of defluence and a lot of lift in a very large area, supporting very, very large amounts of convection across the entire warm sector, as well as just the amount of moisture and heat that we're expected to have across this region will definitely be able to support that in the lack of a cap, which we will look at later. As for our timing portion, we currently do have some storms ongoing up across eastern Tennessee into West Virginia and eastern Kentucky. A couple are severe thunderstorm warned, but we also do have some storms back up into North Carolina, northern South Carolina, as well as some in the enhanced risk region itself, and we are expected to see some pretty messy convection. We may see it form into a little bit of a QLCS like fashion as storms move into the enhanced risk region. However, it does look like the more robust storms are probably going to be further down to the south, and then further down to the south as well into North Carolina and South Carolina. It does look like we are expected to see the potential for a couple of supercells, more discrete supercells, to fire off along the cold front that may be able to be supportive of a tornado risk. So overall, it is going to be pretty messy. I'm not really too sure how that's going to affect our storm potential. It will likely be more inhibiting than it will be supportive of a lot of stuff, especially with the amount of rain showers that's going to be across this region, which will likely make the environment much more colder and lead to decreased instability. So it may be overall a more limiting factor. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our instability across this region, we are expected to see quite a lot of moisture in the open warm sector here. We do have a couple of surface lows, and we do have an occluded front, which is going to lead to overall less moisture at the surface. But we still have quite a lot of moisture at the surface regardless, with dew points that are probably going to be getting upwards of the low 60s to mid 60s, but probably lingering around the low 60s, especially in the enhanced risk area, which are going to be a little bit more on the lower end of things, but should definitely provide us with some moderate to decent instability. Then across the open warm sector itself, between the warm front and the cold front that isn't really associated with an occluded front, we are expected to see dew points that may be able to get upwards of the low 70s to the mid and upper 60s, which will definitely be supportive of some pretty decent instability. We could definitely see quite a lot of instability come out of those dew points in the 60s and the 70s. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to work in conjunction with our dew point to lead to our instability, we are expected to see quite a lot of heat up across the enhanced risk region around the occluded front, with temperature values are going to probably be reaching around the mid to upper 60s to the low 70s in some regions. However, temperatures in the 70s are likely going to be pretty limited. Across the open warm sector, we are expected to see much more heat, with temperatures that are probably going to be getting upwards of the upper 70s and may be able to reach the low 80s in some regions. And coupled together with our dew points that are in the low 70s, we could definitely see quite a lot of instability come out of this across the warm sector. However, with our more limited temperatures and our more limited dew points further up to the north, we are probably going to see much less instability compared to further down south. Taking a look at our lapse rates, starting off with the enhanced risk region, we aren't really expected to see any sort of lapse rates across the region of concern whatsoever, especially across the open warm sector as well. This is likely going to lead to much more limited instability, and with our more modest temperatures and our more modest dew points across the enhanced risk region and the lack of lapse rates, we are probably going to see much less instability because we don't have that big of a temperature gradient with the lack of lapse rates, and that's going to lead to overall less of a tendency for air to rise and less instability. Same with the open and warm sector itself. However, with our large amount of moisture and our pretty decent temperatures, we could definitely see overall more instability, even though we may not have the best lapse rates further down to the south. But we may see some more limited instability as a result. And as far as our hail risk with our lapse rates, we aren't really going to see much aid from our hail risk as far as our lapse rates, and it will likely potentially be more of a limiting factor as we don't have that a larger cold air aloft, a larger region of cold air aloft for our hail to develop in. Taking a look at our 700 millibar temperature as well as our convective inhibition, how that's going to affect our instability as well as our risk for severe thunderstorms overall. We do have warm air advection out of the southeast, southwest, which is needed for convective inhibition. However, our warmer temperatures at aloft do struggle to get really far north. We are probably going to see the majority of our convective inhibition from our 700 millibar flow aloft likely be more limited to more the coastal regions of the Carolinas, which will overall not really impact the risk for severe thunderstorms further up to the north by limiting any free convection. In fact, it will encourage free convection, especially with the amount of lift that we are expected to see from our aid in our defluence. That will again lead to the large amount of rain showers, the large amount of convection that's just free in the open warm sector. However, we may see more warm air advection further down to the south in more of an elevated mixed layer, which will likely keep any random convection at bay and prevent it from forming further down to the south, which could potentially be more helpful to a tornado risk further down to the south. And with the lack of a cap, we are not really going to see much that will help our instability build. So even though with our weak lapse rates and our more modest temperatures and our dew points further up to the north, we aren't really going to see any aid from our convective inhibition whatsoever. We may a little bit further down to the south, but it does look like it is going to be not really all that much of an aid down to the south as well. Taking a look at our instability, starting off their most unstable cape and how that's going to fuel our risk for severe thunderstorms overall, and then we'll look at our surface instability. Across our enhanced risk region, we are probably going to see some pretty modest instability. With cape values are probably going to be mainly around the upper triple digits to the low 1000s. A lot of models were indicating that cape values may not even get up to the 1000s across this region. In fact, that's what a lot of models were indicating earlier. So I'm kind of surprised that we do see a more widespread thousands. With our weaker instability, we will definitely most likely see overall a lower end risk for tornadoes across this region, especially compared to yesterday. But our instability will definitely still be able to fuel a strong updraft and may be able to support the potential for tornadoes across this region. With our shear, it does look like we may definitely see the potential for at least a couple of tornadoes across this region and at least a 5% tornado risk. I do think a 10% tornado risk may be pushing it a little bit. I'm not really too sure about a 10% tornado risk, especially with the amount of shear that we have across this region and our weaker instability. But further down to the south, if I had to forecast a 10% tornado risk, I would move it down to the south substantially further down here, because we have much better cape values, especially with our shear that we have, with cape values upwards of the mid 1000s and approaching the upper 1000s. We'll definitely be able to feel the potential for a strong updraft, and especially with what our models were indicating, where we could see the potential of a couple discrete cells along the cold front, we could definitely see a tornado risk form out of this. This will definitely be an area to watch as far as our tornado risk, and in fact, I'm probably may even watch it more than our 10% tornado risk, to be honest. Taking a look at a surface-based cape, I don't really have much to say about this other than the fact that the majority of our most unstable cape is expected to translate down to our surface cape as well, which will mean that storms are expected to be surface-based and will allow for surface-based rotation and the potential for tornadoes. Regardless, we will still be able to see the potential of some isolated large hail and the potential for some widespread damaging wind gusts. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that's going to aid in the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, starting off with an enhanced risk region, we are expected to see a very large amount of 0 to 3 kilometer cape. It is going to be more on the moderate side to potentially high end side. It's definitely not going to be really crazy, but it should definitely aid in the overall potential for severe thunderstorms, and should definitely be able to aid in the risk for tornadoes. Especially with our shear that we have. Again, our most unstable cape is a little bit more on the lower end side of things, but still, again, may be able to support the potential for at least a couple of tornadoes across this region. I'm not really too sure if a few tornadoes will really be all that supported by our instability, but we will have to wait and see. However, our 0 to 3 kilometer instability will definitely be a very large aiding factor. However, further down to the south, we have a very big pool of 0 to 3 kilometer instability. And it is very strong down to the south across the Carolinas here, with 0 to 3 kilometer instability that may be able to get upwards of 200 to potentially approaching 300 joules per kilogram of 0 to 3 kilometer instability, which will definitely be able to fuel the risk for severe thunderstorms, especially with how strong our most unstable and surface cape is. Again, this area is definitely an area to watch for the potential of tornadoes, and I'm honestly unsure why the SBC didn't extend the 5% tornado risk further down to the south as a result of this setup, because we have very decent shear and very decent instability, and we'll definitely be able to see the potential for tornadoes further down to the south across the Carolinas. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that's going to indicate the risk for tornadoes across this region, starting off with the enhanced risk region further up to the north with that 10% tornado risk. Something I do want to note is that we have very spotty energy helicity index values across this region, which is honestly more in line with a 2% tornado risk out of anything than a 10% tornado risk. So that's another reason why I'm kind of uncertain about why the SPC issued a 10% tornado risk, and I overall do not really think that there's really all that much of a potential for a few tornadoes across this region. I definitely think we should at least maybe have a 5% tornado risk, but overall the tornado risk I do not think is worthy for a 10% tornado risk, especially with our instability. However, further down to the south, this is again another reason why I'm unsure why the SBC did not extend the 5% tornado risk further down to the south, is because we have overall better energy helicity index values further down to the south, indicated by an overall better environment for tornadoes further down to the south, with energy helicity index values upwards of 3 to 2. And just so you know, I am not yapping whatsoever. Other models have agreed with this, and this has been trending on other model runs as well. And virtually every single convective allowing model so far has been trending towards this solution as well. So honestly, I'm not really too sure why the SBC did not issue a 5% tornado risk that extended down across the Carolinas. Taking a look at our damaging wind gust models and how that's going to support the potential for damaging wind gusts across this region. Again, we do have a 30% risk for damaging wind gusts for the enhanced risk area, where we could see the potential for some widespread swaths of damaging wind gusts. And honestly, I'm not really seeing that either. I do think that we may be able to see the potential for some damaging wind gusts across the enhanced risk region and across the open warm sector as well. However, again, that trend further down to the south is continuing, as well as into our damaging wind gust models as well, with the majority of models indicating that we are expected to see the potential of some very widespread swaths of damaging wind gusts with some of those storms that may form down into the Carolinas, as well as some very widespread damaging wind gusts that are currently ongoing, or not currently ongoing, but are expected to pick up over the next couple of hours, with damaging wind gusts that may be able to reach upwards of 50 to 40 miles per hour across eastern portions of the Carolinas and eastern Virginia, which are definitely going to blow around any loose and unsecured objects that may be left around. So definitely make sure you're picking up your stuff that you don't want to blow away, and bringing anything inside that you don't want to blow away. But again, this is another area that we will have to watch for the potential of severe thunderstorms. Taking a look at our meso-analysis page and our hail risks, something I do want to note is that the the large hail parameter, which is the model that we are going to be starting off with, does indicate the hail risk actually being further down to the south in the Carolinas. We also do have a couple small areas that would indicate the potential of at least some small hail. And we can also take a look at some of our other parameters as well regarding our hail risk, where our star's hail size is also indicating the potential for hail further down to the south in the Carolinas. And then we can also take a look at our significant hail, and also indicating the potential for hail across the Carolinas as well. And then for our composite indices, to finish it off, we can look at our sig hail percentage, or SARS sig hail percentage, and it's also indicating the potential for hail across the Carolinas as well. So it does look like overall that models are supporting a better risk for overall everything further down to the south. I'm honestly unsure what was really going on as far as the SBC outlook today. If you guys have any idea what was going on, if I'm missing something and I'm just completely wrong about the positioning for the risk for severe thunderstorms, please let me know so I know how to fix it. Because I honestly don't know if I'm missing anything or not, because this is just like everything I've seen so far is completely off from what the SBC currently has issued. So please let me know if I am doing anything wrong, because I'm more confused than ever with this sort of forecast. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator. Enjoy the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please stay with the alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong this forecast, which there definitely may be depending on the SBC's outlook and what the models are indicating, please let me know. If you have a suggestion or a question, please leave a comment. I do answer them and I do read them. 3 other channels that I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather, Weather Watcher, and JaxonWX. The links to their channels will be in the description. And hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.